This is Changing Denver, a show about our city, how we make it, and how it makes us. I'm Paul Crowley. Three years ago, when I started making this show, I had a simple goal: make money. Any amount. A single dollar represented validation beyond my wildest dreams. Well, I achieved that goal. Faster than I, and especially my wife Megan, anticipated. Then, more started coming in. We started selling the episodes to Confluence. We secured an underwriter for our third season. We got a grant from the library. It was overwhelming in a way I can't really explain to see this little project become something real, something that was worth so much to people. But things are different now. Changing Denver has opened new doors for me, and it's getting harder to prioritize the show. This is why we launched our first ever crowdfunding campaign in April. It's designed to support the Rocky Flats series, but it's also our effort to make this whole project more sustainable. And it matters to me that it's all based on listener support. This is your opportunity to say, this podcast is important to me. And in this age of dying newspapers, it's important to my city, too. All you have to do is go to patreon.com/changingdenver. That's patreon.com/changingdenver and set up a monthly pledge. If you give more than $3 per month, we'll send you 3 Changing Denver stickers and give you access to the transcripts of each episode of the Rocky Flats series, including this one. If you give more than $10 per month, we'll thank you in the credits. But if that's not in your budget, that's okay. This podcast will always be free. Everyone is free to listen to stories like the 2 we've got for you today. It's part 2 and 3 of Rocky Flash, our Rocky Flats fiction series. Starting us off, a story from the wonderful local author, Sonia Christenson. It's called A Good Reason.
A Good Reason. For the most part, it wasn't hard not to talk about what I did at Rocky Flats. I'm a naturally quiet man, and I don't particularly mind lying, if it's for a good reason, which this was, in my book. I understood why we weren't allowed to tell anyone about what we did. The Soviets were everywhere in those days. I told my mother that I was a mechanic. It was easy for her to believe. I had been a mechanic before I joined the Navy, and when I called her, every Wednesday and Sunday, I had plenty of stories from back then to expand upon and change. Our conversations mostly revolved around what was going on in her life, anyway. She was a terrible gossip, and she was also not opposed to lying, although hers was of a different kind. She was a natural exaggerator. You could count on her to make any story more exciting. We also talked about her disobedient cats and, of course, the bygone days when my father was still alive and the family was all together. What I actually did was make plutonium buttons in a glove box. It sounds more exciting than it was at the time. At the time, it was day in, day out, the same thing over and over again. Of course, I didn't know how dangerous it was. I don't think any of us did, except for maybe the people who were too high up to be expected to tell the truth. Often, when talking to my mother, I would imagine the field day she would have if I tried to tell her what I really did. "He's in the FBI," she would whisper over the telephone to her neighbor Jean, sitting in her customary brocade armchair and sipping a Lipton iced tea. "I'm not supposed to know, so don't tell anyone, but he's very high up in dealing with the Reds." So it didn't bother me to be dishonest with my mother. It seemed like it was for the best. There was only one time that it was different. In those days, we got contaminated a lot. There was always something happening, some incident, almost to a daily degree. It felt like nothing. No big deal. On this one day, there was a small fire in a glove box next to my own. It was extinguished immediately, amounting to nothing more to me than a brief bout of shouting and excitement and a little flash of light. Of course, the man whose plutonium had ignited was stripped and got into the shower and cleaned and then taken to the health physics department for further cleaning. I thought to myself, lucky I'm not him, and went about my business. But by the end of the day, I began to feel strange. I don't know how else to describe it. I just felt wrong and sweaty and nauseous and afraid, very sure that something was the matter with me. Like I said, being contaminated felt physically like nothing. And yet there I was, feeling very sure that I felt something and that it was bad. So I went to the health physics department and described in halting words the sensation I was feeling, and the technician working there told me I was fine and declined to test me for anything or administer any cleaning or do anything at all. Go home, he said. Get some sleep. You'll feel better in the morning. In the grip of panic, I told him that I would not feel better in the morning. Said it like a child with tears in my eyes. So Jean, my mother said to me on the phone an hour later, is sitting on her porch right now, waiting for the mailman to come for the third day in a row. I heard her sip her tea. What on earth could she be waiting for? Some kind of package, we speculated? One of her newfangled contraptions, which is what my mother called the new things Jean got for her kitchen. I wanted so badly to tell her. I pictured how I would say it over and over. I pictured her in her brocade chair and what her old face would look like as she heard. Plutonium, she would say. What's plutonium? But I didn't say it, couldn't say it. The Soviets could have had the phone tapped for Christ's sake, or Rocky Flats could have. They would have known if I told her. They would have known. And it broke over me as I hung up for the first time how alone I really was. How if I died because of plutonium, no one would ever know, least of all my mother, the one person I talked to, the only person who would really want to know. I went to the health physics department again the next day. The technician looked at me right in the eyes and said I was fine in the firm voice of someone who is done talking about something. I considered telling him he was a liar and that he should be ashamed of himself, but then again, I was a liar too. And if he was lying, he probably thought he had a good reason. I thought about quitting, but I didn't. It was too good of a job. And now that it's been 30 years and I'm retired, I guess I can say it was probably a false alarm, although I won't really know until the very end, and even then, I'll probably never be 100% sure. My mother died thinking I was a mechanic, which I suppose means I did the right thing, but still, I felt bad at the funeral. She would have wanted to have known.
If you're eager to hear more from Sonia, we've got links to a couple more of her stories on our website, changingdenver.com. But don't head off just yet. We've got another story for you. This one from Giles, the co-host of our Denver Podcast Network sister show, Beyond the Trope. It's a much different take on the Rocky Flats mythos, and I think you're going to like it.
The Forbidden Fields. Air freezes the breath in Gom's lungs. He and Seema huddle close on the back of their hulker, absorbing each other's warmth while they finish the day's patrol along the edge of the Forbidden Fields. In the distance, the orange sky lights up the back of slate-black mountains. Purple clouds float their way, bringing cover for the night but no snow. After a week of near-blizzard conditions, it's a welcome change. Gom scans the fields for signs of movement between them and the mountains. He trusts Seema to watch ahead and guide the beast beneath them over the packed snow. They see no one, a small relief. Only the guardians know the land well enough to ride the whiteout without straying. But after storms, it's vital that they find anyone who may have wandered in, to save them from the slow death that waits beyond, to protect the land from those who would destroy it. At night, they build their fire, hot and bright, a blossom like forgotten flowers and a beacon in the night for any who wander. Their mount claws at the snow, burrowing for the night. Its growls and huffs are a comforting reminder to Gom and Seema that they aren't alone. After a silent meal of herd jerky soup, Seema sits back and sighs. Saw movement in the hills this morning. Gom nods. How far off? She shrugs. They didn't head this way. Figured it wasn't worth more attention. No movement in the fields, Gom says. It's a good sign. It always hurt to watch someone die in the frozen glow, eaten by the air itself. The few who survived came out changed. The Guardians all knew it was easier to kill a man than to kill a monster. The wind wakes them before dawn. The cold will cut our bones today, Seema says. We could stay inside, ride after it slows. Seema shakes her head, stands, and packs her bedroll. It's always this way. Gorn wants to stay in the tent. Seema insists on riding. He doesn't press. Their duty is clear, but the thought of a day wrapped in blankets warms him. The Hulker groans when Gom slips on its leather harness. After a night burrowed in the snow, it radiates heat. It refuses to rise into the wind, and Gom has to jerk the harness so hard that he slips into the snow. He's securing the saddle's nylon straps, the beast snorting but still, when Seema hisses. Gom looks at her, then follows her pointed finger. A single figure, riding a half-starved Hulker, trudges toward them, struggling to hold several ragged layers of fur close to their body. Gom pulls his rifle from the holster in the saddle and moves next to Seema. She checks over her shoulder, tense, but then relaxes. No one behind us, she says, just loud enough to be heard over the wind. Gom takes a step toward the Wanderer. Turn back, he calls. The Forbidden Fields are ahead. The rider continues on, definitely toward the fields. Gom takes another step, raises his rifle. As if encouraged, the rider spurs their mount. Stop! Seema yells. Is it suicide? Or do they think that letting the fields transform them will improve their existence? The horrors of a person changed by the fields are legend. Humanity is stripped, life a technicality of science. Gom won't let that happen today. He focuses down his sights and leaves the dying Hulker. Seema calls another warning. Again, the rider ignores it. Gom fires. The Hulker falls. The rider skids through the snow. In the corner of Gom's eye, Seema moves forward. Rather than lie still, the rider climbs to her feet and wipes snow-covered hair from her face. Turn back, Gom calls. We don't want to hurt you, but we won't let you into the fields. Their gazes lock. The silent plea in her eyes for a life better than this is enough to knock the breath from him. Her decision's made, and his stomach shudders at what he knows will happen. She breaks her gaze and runs, shin deep in snow, straight for the fields. Gom gives her 2 steps to change her mind, then squeezes the trigger. The wind stills, the shot echoes through the air, and the rider falls. A spray of blood colors the once perfect snow, a single drop falling beyond the border. A border only the Guardians know by instinct, but a border that no man should cross.
Find more from Giles Hash on our website, changingdenver.com. Changing Denver is a proud member of the Denver Podcast Network. In the shadow of the mountains,
we speak.
Unclear Danger, the Colorado story of Rocky Flats, is being produced in partnership with the Colorado Independent and the Denver Public Library. If you want to access a transcript of the 2 stories you heard in this episode, and all the other episodes in our Rocky Flats series, past and future, you're going to have to pledge at least $3 per month at patreon.com/changingdenver. Even if you don't, maybe think about making a pledge that's right for you. You could pledge an amount equal to your favorite element's atomic number, for example. Like plutonium. That's probably mine. Let's quickly Google that. Okay, looks like the atomic number is 94, so that would be $94. That has a nice ring to it. Maybe you could go with that. But whatever you do decide, you can pledge at www.patreon.com/changingdenver. Thanks this time to Sonia Christenson, Giles Hash, Tina Griego and Susan Green at the Colorado Independent, Dave Ashton and Maeve Conran at KGNU, Jenny LaPerriere at the Denver Public Library, and Megan Ariano. Thanks also to our super agent backers, Mark Roxwald, Joel Noble, Jeff Freisig, Jason Peterson, and one anonymous donor. Our theme song is Minnow by Felix Fast Forward. The rest of the music for this episode and for all of Unclear Danger is by Ethernaut, Bisou de l'Enfant Sauvage, and Soft and Loathing. Chapter 4 of Unclear Danger is coming in a couple weeks. Until then, I'm your host, Paul Crowley.